Money Radio, discussing the business of making and spending money.
You to this week's edition of National Economy Money Radio. This is the segment, National Economy Money Radio, and we are discussing an important topic today. It's on remittances, high charges on remittances. Yes, how high bank charges push up cost of Nigeria's diaspora remittances. The issue is an important one because remittances have become an important segment of Nigeria's GDP. Just before COVID-19, Nigeria's GDP was around, say, 450, 500 billion. And of that, diaspora remittances was around 25 billion. And it was projected to increase. So if that's 25 billion, that means it was contributing about 5% of Nigeria's GDP, which is huge. When we talk about the budget, it was close to 85% if we are comparing remittances to the country's budget. So you can see how important that issue is. But the Nigerians have been spending more, much more. Although the cost is reducing because of technology and other factors, but Nigerians have been spending much more. And arguably, Nigerians spend about the highest right now in the world on remittance charges before we can get that money. And that is a discouraging factor. We'll talk about figures while we are in the program. So with me to discuss the issue is, she has always been on my left today. She has taken the right. Mr. Anthony Uko, our in-house analyst. Mr. You are welcome.
Thank you.
And as usual, you look bright and shiny.
Thank you.
Yeah. So my name is Case Harmon. I'm your host. Mr. Nigerians spending about the highest in the world when it comes to charges and remittance back home. Let's discuss the issues. Why?
Well, let's say, like you have pointed out before, foreign remittances play a key role here in Nigeria in terms of contributing to the budget, to the nation's direct inflow. Nigeria basically earns its foreign exchange from importation or from export, crude oil export. So not much else comes from other sources. So having another source like the remittances also had to shore up the nation's external reserves and all that. However, we see that the Nigerians abroad, the Nigerians in diaspora, they've had to spend much more on average here now, about 8% or more on every amount that they are sending back to their families at home, or to do one business transaction or the other. One of the reasons for this, or among the reasons for it, would say is the channels that they've had to use. A lot of the remittances still have to come in through the banking system. Most people have to go to banks to get these remittances, and being bank-to-bank transactions, transferring them from banks from whichever countries they are sending from to our Nigerian banks, come with some charges. And we find out in Nigeria that there are so many bank charges that you would not even, sometimes you don't know, you know some, but the others you may not know. The hidden charges, so to say. So when you build this into it, you don't know what the banks are charging, adding up besides the charge that is known. So, and there are other costs that the banks will tell you they are incurring in terms of data, in terms of providing their own electricity, in terms of maybe even data, and so on. So by the time all of this cost is put into it, you find the cost being more than what we have um, in other climes, even surrounding us here in West Africa.
Yeah, so basically what you're talking about is infrastructure. Infrastructure. You know, when we talk about infrastructure, usually we may not perceive how deeply the lack of infrastructure is affecting the wider economy. This is just one facet of it, where we have infrastructure affecting the cost of sending money. Actually, we such a cost is similar in many sub-Saharan African countries. We have, take for example, of course, Nigeria is the highest receiver. About 50% of sub-Saharan Africa's receipts of remittances from come to Nigeria. But the other African countries, they have a slightly lower cost of remitting from their nationals abroad. Their cost of remitting is slightly lower than Nigeria. Take for example, between last year and this year, the cost of remitting to other West African countries or other sub-Saharan African countries was somewhere around 8.9%, compared to a global average of 6.4%. You see, there's a huge gap there. 8.9% to 6.4% global average. But that global average, when it comes to specific countries, it may be lower, and we'll come to that. Now, that of other sub-Saharan African countries has actually reduced to around 8% now. Whereas Nigeria, which was higher before, that was by last year, Nigeria was a bit higher. We have the charges have now dropped to 8.4%. So we are 0.4% higher than them. Yes. So that's where we are right now. But be that as it may, we can say that Nigeria is about the highest in the world. And like you mentioned, cost of data, the cost of electricity, security is an issue that is not put into it. We have, of course, there are other charges there. Yes, you have to get your own water as a bank. You have to get your own water.
Wonder what has got to do.
Of course, it's when people go to the banks and they need to wash their hands. We are generally talking about infrastructure. So the fact that we have this infrastructure problem, that is what makes it, say, in the West, abroad, you have things like data is very free. Electricity, you don't have to generate your own electricity. The security is less of an issue. We have other things that are taken for granted. Here, the cost of data is huge. Of course, you have to use data to process these remittances. The cost of energy is huge. You have to buy diesel, which is expensive. The cost of security, like I mentioned, the cost of water. So these banks here, our local banks, which are carrying out these transactions, they are rendering you a service by receiving your money and giving to you. But the cost of that service is high because the inputs are high. The cost of inputs are high. So the cost of the service in general must be higher than what contains there. So because of that, those banks on that side, of course, the banks here will tell them for this transaction or for this service we are giving out, it costs us so much, and they will have to pass over that cost to the remitting banks. And the remitting banks will have to pass the cost over to
To the
The
senders.
senders, that is our brothers and sisters, our uncles, nephews, our cousins, our friends, our fathers, our mothers, and our children who are out there, they have to pay the brunt. And that is why we see that just last year, X amount was spent. If you compare that to maybe sending, before we go to that comparison issue, let's look at something. The United Nations has projected the intent to reduce the cost of remittance to 3% by 2030 because they have realized that remittances actually is a force for equalization globally. You understand? It's a force for equalization, and developing countries actually need remittances. Look, the amount of remittances sent to developing countries is actually more than development or aid. You understand?
Yeah.
Yes. So they realize that this is a force for development. They need to realize that it's a force for equalization. Of course, it can't be utmost equalization because the rich are rich and the poor are poor, but at least there's a degree of equalization there. And so they realize that this is a good trend. Remittances is a good trend. Having said that, they have a target to reduce the cost of remittances to 3% as part of the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. So they have been making some progress. But that progress they have been making is only a reduction they have attained. They haven't come near that 3% yet.
Of course, yes. Like you pointed out, if the global average is 6.4%, and the United Nations is targeting 3% under its SDG goals. So you see, the gap there is still much. But while it is, you would say it's high for globally at 6.4%. For sub-Saharan Africa, it's still much higher at 8% and above 8%, particularly for Nigeria. So, well, the onus is on the government to be able to do something, particularly in the area of infrastructure, so that they will also be in on the drive to get this cost of remittance down, particularly in view of the benefits that it has to do for the Nigerians who receive these monies and then the economy generally.
There's so much to talk about. There's just so much to talk about on this issue. But let's take a breather, and by the time we come back, we want to go deep into this. We want to delve into it and see what the government can do to reduce the cost of remittances, because I know that that's what you want to bring in now, and I can see that you're anxious to do that. But let's take a short break. Listeners, please stay with us. When we come back, we want to go into what the federal government can do, or state government, which other government it is. We want to see what they can do to make sure that they fall in line with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and to reduce the cost of remittances worldwide. So just stay with us. We'll be right back.
sponsorship, and advert placements, please contact 080-3688-6158. Last Word Leadership Podcast Studio. You have the last word.
Money Radio, discussing the business of making and spending money.
Welcome back, still on Money Radio Leadership Podcast. This is the National Economy segment of the program, and I'm your host, Case Hammond. In the studio with me is still Mr. Anthony. We are talking about the cost of remittances. The topic is how high bank charges push up cost of Nigerians' diaspora remittances. And that is a problem we have been discussing. Before we went on the break, we were talking about how the federal government can bring down those charges or how, whatever. But it is just not by fiat. It has to be, it has to come with some action, some actions that we're about to talk about. So, let's look at a few statistics. The cost Chinese in the US, for example, or in Britain, incur from sending money to China, or the Indians incur from sending money to India, the Malaysians, the Singaporeans, name them, the Israelis, all of that, is much lower, between 4 and 5% now. That is bank to bank. But the cost here is higher. And like you mentioned, it is as a result of poor infrastructure. Data, electricity, water, security, and the rest of it. So that is a problem which is eating deep. Maybe Nigerians abroad would have loved to send more. Between last year and this year, Nigerians spent 2.94 billion on remittance charges on remittances, and most of those charges they emanate from here. It's because of the poor infrastructure that we have. So what can be done? The government cannot do that by fiat. You cannot say the cost of sending money from abroad is too high. You need to reduce it. That's not how it's done. It has to be innovation. What you do to make sure that those costs are reduced. So let's talk about some of those innovations. We know that when it comes to bank transactions, sending money, you go to your bank say for example the US, and you want to send to a local bank, that is higher. That is the 6.4% global average. But when it comes to, technology has improved things, right? Mm-hmm. And some of the improvements that the technology have made include you just send it from your account to the next person's account. It's straight, person to person, P2P. Mm-hmm. And that is lower. That is around 4 to 5%. So technology is actually improving this issue of bank charges. What do you think about both of them? What can be done?
Yeah, the issue of digital transmission of this remittances is one way that is going to go a long way to bring down the cost of um, diaspora remittances. However, for Nigeria, there are still that challenge of having that money from your digital account, from your digital wallet, transferred into your bank account. Before the ban or the central bank coming out to say that Niger- no Nigerian bank accounts must be linked with cryptocurrency
Yeah.
transactions. It was easier because in the crypto space there are so many crypto is technically a digital thing, so it's easier to do a person to person, a P2P transaction transfer of these remittances, and then it's also easier for them to have that money transferred into their local bank accounts.
Yeah.
But we've seen this stop with the CBN prescribing that line of transaction. So now Nigerians find it more difficult if they get this money into their wallet, into their P2P wallet, getting it out into the getting converting it into their local currency is even still much higher than what you would have to go through doing it bank to bank. So right now they've all fallen back on using the banks all over again, bank to bank, fully. I know the CBN wants to be able to keep tab on the volume of remittances that is coming in, and it also wants that the remittances should be able to count towards shoring up the country's external reserves.
Yeah.
Yeah, by way of the foreign exchange.
Yeah.
That comes in. So, however, it seems that the one that has a benefit to the nation, that all the remittances come through the legal banking sector, then it's now the onus is now on them to ensure that many of the costs that banks still impute into the transfer process is eliminated, so that the diasporans, brothers and sisters and relatives won't have to spend so much as costs on the monies they are sending back home.
So the issue is not just about infrastructure; it's also about policy.
Policy, yeah.
So we can see that much of the problem we're talking about is we're talking about self-inflicted problem. When we say self-inflicted, is something that has not been done, or something that has been done. Something that has not been done, we're talking about infrastructure. Something that is being done or that has been done, we're talking about policy. So it's self-inflicted. Now, let's talk about infrastructure. Compared to other countries, Nigerians pay more for data. Is that true or false? Compared to other countries, Nigerians pay more for electricity. True or false? Compared to other countries, Nigerians pay more for bank transactions, fees, cost of transport transactions. True or false? Compared to other countries, Nigerians pay more for security. True or false? Compared to other countries, Nigerians suffer more on just those little things that will contribute to smooth operations, true or false. Listen, over to you.
Well, you set the, you can as well, well, technically, if you want to look at electricity, then Nigerians get to pay much more than in other climes is basically because they have to generate the electricity, the power by themselves. If it was generated, if they were getting power direct from the national grid, it would come at a lower cost for them. But whereby they have to do that by themselves, it comes at a higher cost.
You hit the point. Data.
Well, I think you may be more knowledgeable about that.
I think, based on my discussions with people who are outside, it's like Nigerians pay, depending on the country. In some other sub-Saharan African countries, Nigerians pay less. In compared to European and American countries, I think Nigerians pay more for data because basically there are places you go in the West and you don't have to use your data. And if you are using personal data, it's something you just pay maybe on a monthly basis and it's given to you. Here we may choose, of course, which one to do, whether daily, monthly, daily, or weekly, whatever, or yearly. But compared to Occidental countries or Hesperian countries, I think it would be more here.
Yeah. Then when you look at security, the cost of the insecurity in a number of locations within the country puts additional costs on insurance, on cost of getting these things done. So all of that is built into
the cost of
remittances.
And of course, when you talk about water, you were laughing at me when we talked about water, but water is actually something that you need to improve your services. Imagine you go to the bank and there is no water.
How many people who go to the bank wait to get water to drink?
It's part of a COVID-19 protocol.
There's hand sanitizer and there's no.
It's all part of the cost.
Are they providing that? They are not. They may not necessarily have to provide that. So you can provide your own hand sanitizer. So I don't think it should come in here as a cost.
So the general tip we can get from today's discussion on Money Radio is that infrastructure is affecting. It affects the country. For a wide variety of ways. Imagine people who are not living in the country are suffering it. You understand? Yes, in the form of high cost of remittances. So you don't have to just live here, but you suffer it also. So infrastructure is a necessity, sine qua non to development. That's how we come to the end of today's edition of Money Radio. You have been on the the Nigerian economy segment of the program, and this is Leadership Podcast. I want to say thank you very much, myself, for being here on the show again today. Thanks to you, our producers. Thanks to you, our listeners, especially you, our loyal listeners. This is where you get news, information, and analysis about things happening in the country. We encourage you to always stay tuned to Money Radio. Until we meet another day for another bumper edition of the program, we say COVID-19 is real. Stay safe. Go and get your vaccine. Stay blessed.
Thank you for watching. For sponsorship and advert placements, please contact 080-3688-6158. Last Word Leadership Podcast Studio. You have the last word.